Good morning, everyone. This is Peter LaValle, Communications Director for the Attorney General's Office. I want to remind everyone on the phone in particular to please keep your phones on mute to minimize noise. We will open the phone lines at the end for questions, as well as for questions here in the room. And with that, I'll turn it over to Attorney General Bob Ferguson.
Thanks so much, Peter. Thanks for all of you for being here, and those on the phone. Appreciate your interest in this matter. So, as many of you know, Comcast services are in more than 1 million homes right here in Washington State. And today, I have filed a lawsuit in King County Superior Court accusing Comcast of more than 1.8 million violations of Washington State's Consumer Protection Act. Our complaint alleges that the company's own documents reveal a pattern of illegally deceiving all of their Washington State customers over the past few years. This case is a classic example of a big corporation systematically deceiving Washington State consumers and putting profits above those customers and the law. I'm joined today by two attorneys from our Consumer Protection Division. To my right is Dan Davies, D-A-V-I-E-S, Dan Davies, and to my left is Joel Delman, D-E-L-M-A-N, Joel as in J-O-E-L, Joel Delman. So today I'll explain our lawsuit, I'll discuss how we're going to hold Comcast accountable and return money back to Washington State consumers, and then we're going to open up for questions at the end. It's important to note at the outset that this lawsuit is the first of its kind in the nation, even though Comcast employs many of these same deceptive practices across the country. There are many allegations to this complaint, so I'm going to focus on 3 broad areas. First, we have significant allegations regarding Comcast's Service Protection Plan. So Comcast markets and sells this plan to its customers as a product that will allow them, the customer, to avoid all service call fees should customers ever experience service problems that requires an on-site Comcast technician visit. Up until June, Comcast claimed this protection plan was comprehensive, that's in quotes, was comprehensive and, quote, covers all chargeable service calls for your Xfinity services without additional service fees. It further claimed that when customers signed up for this plan, they will, and I'm quoting now, enjoy worry-free maintenance of all inside wiring for your cable TV, high internet, and phone services. In addition, you'll enjoy knowing you're covered for service calls related to customer-owned equipment connected to Comcast services. It's the end of the quote. Comcast routinely made these representations through their website, and they form the basis of sales scripts Comcast representatives used in marketing this plan to Washington State consumers. I'll talk more about those scripts shortly. Unfortunately, Comcast grossly misrepresented the protection plan to induce Washington State consumers to purchase it. Contrary to Comcast's claims that the plan provides comprehensive coverage, it covers only a narrow scope of repairs. For example, despite advertising to consumers that the plan covers, quoting now, all inside wiring, it does not include wiring inside the walls of a residence. And that, of course, is wiring that constitutes most of the inside wiring in the majority of customer homes. The online description did not identify any limitations on the coverage. In fact, it did just the opposite. Comcast claimed the list of items covered by this plan is, quote, not all-inclusive, suggesting there's more protections than they advertised. Comcast deceptively described the plan since at least January of 2011. This deceptive marketing was intentional. Internal Comcast customer service scripts, created to be read to customers over the phone, deceptively claimed the service protection plan, and I'm quoting now, and I think it's on one of our poster board visuals. These are the scripts, said the following, quote, eliminates any concerns about being charged additional fees for service calls related to inside wiring. Or, quote, will cover service call charges that require repairs to cable TV, high-speed internet, or telephone wiring inside your home. Again, the plan does not cover wiring inside the walls of the home. We also found Comcast misled consumers by failing to explain other significant limitations of the plan. For example, it does not cover repairs to consumer-owned equipment. After reviewing the company's practices and documentation, we began an investigation into the Comcast customer experience. As part of our investigation, Comcast customers called Comcast representatives and discussed the service protection plan. We asked them about it. Over the course of more than 20 interactions with Comcast representatives, the service protection plan was accurately described once. 75% of the time, customers were told the plan covered inside wiring. Not true. More than 40% of the time, customers were told the plan covered all customer equipment issues. Also not true. So what did all this cost Washingtonians? Customers who signed up for the service protection plan paid $4.99 a month, about $60 a year. As a result, over a 5-year period, Washington consumers paid more than $73 million in fees to Comcast. Comcast needs to pay that money back. I want to move now to Comcast's deceptive practices regarding a different promise that they made to consumers. This is called their customer guarantee. Comcast makes this customer guarantee to all of its approximately 1.1 million customers here in Washington State. The guarantee promises, and I'm quoting now, "We won't charge you for a service visit that results from a Comcast equipment or network problem. We won't charge you for a service visit that results from a Comcast equipment or network problem." Sounds pretty good, right? Comcast discloses no limitation to this guarantee. However, Comcast broke this promise by charging thousands of Washington customers for service calls that resulted from a Comcast equipment or network problem. To me, one particular allegation epitomizes Comcast's treatment of their customers. The company created a code for its technicians to charge consumers for a service call that under the guarantee should be free. The service resolution code allows technicians, and this is a quote from the code, to add service charges to a normally not charged fixed code. They create a code to charge customers for something that under their guarantee they knew could not be charged. Comcast charged customers more than 500 times using this code from 2013 to 2015. I'll now move to the third and final focus of our complaint. During our investigation, we uncovered improper credit screening by Comcast. This matters because it results in a hard hit to consumers' credit reports, which often means a lower credit score. New Comcast customers must undergo a credit screening prior to obtaining services, unless they pay Comcast a deposit to avoid the screening. Despite this, we discovered more than 6,000 improper credit screenings. Here's what that means. Either customers paid the deposit to avoid a credit check, and Comcast ran it anyway, or customers were forced to pay the deposit despite their having a high credit score. These credit checks potentially affected all of those customers' credit reports. So let me just briefly describe what we're asking the court for in our complaint today. First, we're asking for more than $73 million in restitution to all service protection plan subscribers. In other words, all the plan subscribers should get their money back. Number two, full restitution for all service calls that applied an improper service code. We estimate this to total over $1 million. Number three, removing improper credit checks from 6,000 consumer credit reports. Number four, up to $2,000 per violation of the State Consumer Protection Act. And we are alleging, by the way, more than 1.8 million violations of the Consumer Protection Act. Also going forward, Comcast must clearly disclose limitations of their service protection plan in advertising and through its representatives. They must correct improper service codes and implement a compliance procedure for improper customer credit checks. The bottom line is, I refuse to allow Comcast to put its profits before people, before Washingtonians who entered into these plans, assuming that the information that Comcast was telling them was accurate. It was not, and that's not okay. So at this point, we're going to open up to questions. What I'll do, for those on the phone, we'll start with some folks. We have a lot of folks here in the room, so I'll start with people here in the room. Dan, Joel, and myself will do our best to repeat the question that we hear so folks on the phone can hear it. I'll take a few questions here, and then what I'll do is we'll turn, Peter, perhaps to folks on the phone. And again, we'll do our best to identify our voices for those on the phone when we're answering the question, and we'll also do our best to repeat the questions that we hear so the folks on the phone can hear it. So with that, let's get started.
I think this come to your attention.
Yep. Go ahead, sir.
How did this come to your attention?
Yeah, this, as many of you know, we receive more than 20,000 consumer complaints a year in our Consumer Protection Division. This initial complaint actually came from a Comcast customer who happens to be an employee of the Office of the Attorney General. So that was the first contact we had. There have been subsequent complaints subsequent to that, but that was the initial one that we heard, and that involved the credit screening, if I recall correctly. The first complaint involved the credit screening that started our investigation.
Comcast has pre-responded to this.
Sure.
I'd like to quote from their statement, if I may, and get your response. This is attributed to Beth Hester, VP of External Affairs for Comcast in Washington. She says that the Service Protection Plan covers 99%, more than 99% of repair calls. She says we worked with the AG's office to address every issue they raised, and we made several improvements based on their input. She says, given that we were committed to continue working collaboratively with the AG's office, we're surprised and disappointed they have instead chosen litigation. We stand behind our products and services. Response?
Sure. Let's unpack that a little bit. There's a lot
Did
there.
you work with them?
So number one, they are not surprised. Period. Full stop. And I'll repeat. Well, the question was a lengthy one. My apologies. It was, and folks probably have it. There sounded like there might have been a release from Comcast outlining their perspective of this, right? So one part of that question was, hey, Comcast suggesting they're surprised by this action. No, they are not surprised. Our negotiations came to a conclusion last week, and they understood that, and they understood what the next step would be, which was filing this lawsuit. So no, again, not true. Number two, we appreciate that Comcast has, in the past month or so, taken some steps to improve some of what we allege. It's worth pointing out, though, that this investigation started more than a year ago, I believe, more than a year ago, and frankly, it took the imminent filing of our complaint before they corrected those. So they knew what the problems were more than a year ago, and for the better part of that year, they did nothing to correct them, despite knowing we were investigating and where we were heading and what our thoughts were on this, okay? So we appreciate that as this lawsuit has become imminent, okay, that they have corrected some of our concerns. That doesn't change the fact that for the better part of a year, they frankly did nothing. In terms of the 99%, I'll let Dan maybe speak to a bit of that, but I guess one point I will make is that nothing changes the fact that they were deceptive in how they advertised this plan. That's what matters under the law, right? You cannot be deceptive in how you promote a product, period. Can't do it. Number two, the plan was to cover everything, basically, right? So it's a little bit like saying, well, hey, we're going to provide a car insurance for you, and you find out later on it just doesn't cover you on Sundays, right? That's not the point, right? You assume it covers everything. If they say it covers all of your car insurance, you assume that means every day of the week. It doesn't exclude something later on that you don't know about. And Dan, is there anything you want to add on the 99% part of what they're saying? This is Dan Davies.
Yes, I'd also add, with respect to the 99% figure, that my understanding is individuals who were charged by Comcast despite subscribing to the Service Protection Plan. It doesn't take into account individuals who, for example, had a customer equipment problem, had a Comcast technician come to their house and say, I can't do anything about it, it's a customer equipment issue. So those people, there are, I'm sure, thousands of individuals who, Comcast would have come, they had the Service Protection Plan, they thought that Comcast would repair their customer equipment issue, and that did not happen. Those are not accounted for in Comcast's 99% figure. Same goes for the inside wiring issues. There are, I'm sure, plenty of people who had internal wiring, that's wall-fished wiring, we all have it within our houses, where Comcast would have come out to the customer's house and seen that it was a wall-fished wiring issue and just simply said, oh, we can't address that issue. You're gonna have to hire a private contractor or you're gonna have to make the repairs yourself. That is not taken into account when Comcast says that they've covered 99% of the repairs.
And so again, this is Bob, just as a final point, say they're surprised. I mean, there have been extensive conversations. I've been involved in those conversations, want to be clear, up through last week, so no, there's no surprise.
What brought the talks to an end?
So the question I'll repeat, this is Bob, is what brought the talks to an end? Just speaking broadly, I would say that in any negotiation, whether or not I will agree to resolve potential litigation with a settlement. I need to be satisfied that the amount paid by the target, in this case Comcast, does a couple things. One, it meets my view of the harm done to consumers, number one. The gravity of the deception, and returns dollars back to Washington State consumers in a sufficient amount, okay? And in this case, I felt that where we ended up did not satisfy those criteria.
They were obviously marketing this. Once you began discussing changes, were they still marketing the service plan?
So the question was, let me just make sure I got that right, was that once we started our investigation.
Right, were
and
they still marketing?
Were they still marketing?
And once you were even in discussions, were they still marketing the plan
Yep.
as we see it?
So the question was essentially, well, once we started our investigation more than a year ago, I'll have Dan covered this one, I think, and Joel can pipe in as well. Did they change their marketing? Were there any changes over the course of that year and while we had negotiations going on with them? Was there any change in their marketing? Dan, do you want to get to the specifics of that?
So we began our investigation over a year ago, as Attorney General Ferguson mentioned. And at that time, we expressed our concerns, our specific concerns regarding the service protection plan and the language that it used in their marketing materials and the scripts that they used. And nothing was done for over a year. It was not until litigation became imminent that they finally made changes to the plan.
So why don't we go to a couple of folks on the phone? We'll come back to folks in the room if that works, but we'll open it up. Peter, are the folks ready to just jump in now? Great, so it's a little hard for folks on the phone to not talk over each other, I understand, but if you can do your best to maybe ask a question, if you don't mind identifying yourselves, that'd be great.
Hi, this is Leslie Miranda with BuzzFeed News. Can you hear me okay? I'm not sure if the
Yes.
connection-
No, you're coming through just fine.
Okay, great. I just had a quick question. I know that the investigation started with a complaint from somebody about the credit reporting issue from the AG's office, but did you receive any other complaints about the billing issue or any of the other issues? And if you did, how many complaints did you receive about the issues?
Sure, not sure we can give you an exact number, but I'll have Dan give you a bit more specifics on the number of complaints that we received. Dan?
So we've received complaints with respect to all three issues. With respect to some of them, sometimes it's difficult to, when you're dealing with deceptive conduct, the complaint might not come in and be addressed specifically to what we're alleging here. For example, if someone complains to you that they didn't know that they subscribed to the service protection plan in the first place, that comes to our attention, and we've had multiple instances of that occurring. Same with respect to the fixed codes. Customers don't know specifically what Comcast fixed code said. They just knew that they were charged for service calls that they believed should have been covered by the Comcast guarantee, or in some instances they were told that the service call would be free and then were charged by it. And we've received, I believe, dozens of complaints, possibly over hundreds, with respect to the service call issue.
And just to add one, this is Bob again, just to add one more point on the complaints. As many folks know on the call or here in person, sometimes we start investigations because of consumer complaints. It could be an email or phone call. Sometimes something that we see ourselves. It comes from all different forms. This is not unusual in terms of getting complaints along these lines in all three of these areas. It was pretty typical from that standpoint. Other questions from folks on the phone?
Yes, good morning. This is Charles Harrison with Almundo Communications. You may have already covered this. I apologize, I came a little bit late. What kind of time frame do you estimate or project for this type of a lawsuit to reach resolution in the courts?
So the question for the folks in the room was, how long do we anticipate that it would take to resolve this litigation in the courts? That's uncertain, obviously, right? We just don't make predictions about this. I anticipate Comcast will vigorously defend itself. I will say that we feel confident in our allegations. I'd be curious if in Comcast's statement, if they rebutted specifically things like what their actual instructions to their representatives were in terms of communicating to Washington State consumers. I doubt that they challenge that because it's their own scripts, right? So we feel our complaint is very solid. And how long it takes, look, these things sometimes take time, right? It's hard for us to predict. But the key point is we were unsatisfied in the negotiations. We're prepared to litigate it, whatever time it does take.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
so
I would
Dan,
just-
jump right in, yeah.
This is Dan Davies. I would just add that I believe the trial was just set for July 31st of next year.
Thanks. One more question.
you.
Thank you. One more question from the phone before I come back to folks who might have questions in the room here.
Bob, you mentioned
Yeah.
500 service calls where extra charges were levied. Do you have a dollar figure attached to those 500 total calls?
So the question for those on the phone went to those 500 service charges on that one code that, I'm sorry, I don't have the language back in front of me, but essentially says we're going to charge you for something that we can't charge you for. And the question was how much, what's the cost of those? Dan, can you speak to that?
Sure. So the service call charge ranges from between $36.50 and $70 per service call. Now, one thing to clarify, that's one specific code was used over 500 times, but there are multiple service call fixed codes that we allege should have been covered by the customer guarantee because they addressed Comcast network kit problems or Comcast equipment problems.
So to be clear, the one service code you're talking about, again, was what?
That was a service code that was expressly described as, in Comcast's own policies, as used to add service charges to a normally not charged fixed code. That one, of course, stood out to us.
So,
And so that is just an important point, is that there are many allegations in our complaint. For the sake of time, we're trying to condense that here for all of you, but there are multiple codes at issue. We chose one to highlight what we thought was, by any measure, especially egregious.
You're saying you're the first state to pursue this. Have you been in touch with other states? Because this negotiation has been going on, I take it something may have happened.
Sure. So the question is, for those on the phone, that we are the first state to bring these allegations, and the question is, have we been in contact with other states regarding these concerns? The answer is no. So unlike a number of cases we bring, it's called a multi-state, where a number of states are involved in alleging a Consumer Protection Act violation. This is not a multi-state. There are no other states involved. This is just Washington State bringing this cause of action. So no, this is not part of a multi-state. We've not had contact with other states.
But are other states fishing around? Have they called you? I mean, this is a national company.
Right. The follow-up question is, are other states contacting us? This is a national company. They're in approximately 40 states. The answer is no. We've not had communication with other states about this. This is our own investigation based on the complaints we received in our office about violations we believe are under Washington State's Consumer Protection Act. That said, these are nationwide policies as we understand them. The deceptive acts appear on their website, representatives who are presumably speaking to people all around the country. But no, this is a Washington State specific case. Whether other AGs show an interest in this remains to be seen. We'll see how that plays out. That's not been our focus. This is our case.
Bob, did you look at 3 or 4 other major broadband providers in Washington? CenturyLink, that you got Wave, there really aren't very many, and they all tend to emulate Comcast business practices. So what investigation did you do looking into other companies providing these services besides Comcast?
So the question is, have we looked at other providers in a similar context? As I think you guys know, we do not comment. This is our answer to any question like that, right? So I'm not speaking about other providers, but in general, we never speak about any investigations we have, or even whether or not we have an investigation until we have something public to announce. So we just don't get into discussing any other investigations that we may or may not have, or whether we even have an investigation. Right now, the focus is Comcast in this particular lawsuit.
When you say it's the first of its kind in the nation, you mean specifically about these service protection plans?
Correct. That's it. Thank you for that. The question was, when we say first of its kind in the nation, the question was, do we mean around the service protection plan, the other allegations? Yes, that's exactly right. That these allegations are being brought by the first time in this lawsuit. Correct.
Well, what about the credit checking? Yeah, the credit checking, is that the first of its kind too related to, I mean, how often does a company like Comcast do credit checks on customers?
So the follow-up question went to the credit checks, whether this was the first lawsuit around the allegations with the credit checks. So maybe I'll turn to the team to make sure I don't want to get that wrong. Is this the first of its kind around that issue, Dan?
At least, as far as we're aware, this is the first lawsuit by a government agency with respect to the credit check issue.
Are there statutes, I mean,
What's that?
go ahead.
Maybe we want to take a couple
Yeah,
more.
let's do a couple more, then we'll give a last chance to folks on the phone. Then we're happy to stick around and take questions one-on-one as well.
Are there statutes on the books that talk about running someone's credit when you have not given them permission to do so? And is there a clause in the Comcast contract that allows you, when you sign it, that you give up the right for them to run your credit? You see what I'm getting at?
I think I see what you're saying. So the question goes to the credit checks, whether there's, for example, a clause that allows Comcast to run them, and what the relevant law may be around improperly running
Right.
credit checks. And so I'll ask the team to get in the details of
I
that.
just want to know if they broke the law in running someone's credit when they should not have.
So Dan, do you want to take that one?
Sure. There are a variety of statutes relating to credit checks and when a proper credit check can and cannot be run. In this case, we are the Consumer Protection Division, and we certainly believe that their actions violate Washington State's Consumer Protection Act, which bars unfair and deceptive acts and practices. So it's kind of a catch-all that we believe covers this issue.
Has this been referred to criminal?
No. Our authority here is under our civil laws in Washington State, so that's what this is. I'll turn now and see if anyone on the phone has any questions. And by the way, we're happy to stick around and take additional questions, but one last chance for folks on the phone.
Yeah, this is Jerry Cornfield from the Everett Herald. I just wondered if Mr. Ferguson, are you a Comcast customer and might of any of this?
I don't. It's my personal, where I subscribe is neither here nor there, right? And I never talk about my own personal views on these things or targets or any of that for all sorts of obvious reasons, right? So we have a strong complaint, and that's what we're focused on. One last question here in the room. Did you have? Oh, sorry. Do you have one?
The grand total here is about 100 million.
So it's broken down in multiple ways, right? So number one, for example, on this, so the question goes to how much we are seeking. So there's $73 million we are seeking on the service protection plan. Guys, make sure I get this right on my notes in front of me now. $73 million that we believe needs to go back to those 500,000 Washington State consumers who essentially paid that $73 million over the past 5 years, $4.99 at a time, right? We also are alleging specific dollar amounts for the codes and other improper actions. Fair to say that $73 million is the biggest amount, that'd be the restitution side of it. We also, of course, on top of that, okay, on top of that restitution, that would go back to consumers. The Washington State Consumer Protection Act allows us to request a penalty of up to $2,000 per violation of the Washington State Consumer Protection Act. So per violation, we can ask the court, and the court can impose up to $2,000 per specific violation. We are alleging approximately 1.8 million violations of the Washington State Consumer Protection Act. So look, just to close, maybe there's a good chance to do that is, so it's a significant dollar amount by any measure. And we're one state, right? It's a significant dollar amount. I view a big part of what we do in the Consumer Protection Division as holding powerful interests accountable when they do not play by the rules. And in this case, over and over and over again, Comcast most certainly did not play by the rules. You are not allowed in Washington State to engage in unfair or deceptive business practice. You can't do it. And we believe the facts are clear that this was not just on occasion, once in a while, accidental. This was systematic over a period of years in which they set about to induce Washington State consumers, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them, to give up their hard-earned dollars for a product that was not what Comcast promised. And that's not okay. We are optimistic in how this will end here in King County Superior Court. But it's fair to say it's a sweeping set of allegations against Comcast. I was disappointed since you raised the question about, hey, they're saying they tried to work this out. I'm so surprised. Look, when you get when you know you're under investigation from our office, okay, for the conduct we described here, it would certainly be my expectation that you address those problems right away. Yes, we'll have conversations, try and work something out, but address those problems. It's pretty clear cut, right? Took them a year on the eve of litigation before they changed those practices. You know, what can you say, right? You have a billing code that says, we're going to your house, you give a technician a code that says, bill a customer for something you cannot bill them for. What's up with that? 500 times they did it. Look, not every Washington consumer can hire an attorney to take on a powerful interest and they don't play by the rules. A lot of times you don't even know they're not playing by the rules, right? That's the point of why we have a consumer protection division in the state, why we have attorneys like these guys and our professional staff who can hold these folks accountable. And so we'll go forward, we're optimistic, and thank all of you for your interest. We'll be sticking around for a few minutes afterwards to have to take any questions you may have. For all those on the line, thanks so much for being on, we really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.